Some people... It's not working, okay. Finally, some people have told me that my earlier Draw My Life video was not an actual Draw My Life video, as it mostly wasn't. However, you also may note that there are multiple parts in this series, because I've lived a long life, a long and fulfilling life, and I have much more fulfillment to be had. So, this is the second portion, and this will get ever closer to me. Okay. So, if you remember on our last note, there was some unfortunate things happened as the helium life forms usurped the ubiquity of the hydrogen life forms, ultimately resulting in stars and therefore all other things having to die, just as the Inflatons did. So yeah, that's a recap. The Inflatons were the first people, the eponymous first people, and then they died, but they created stars where hydrogen lived and the helium revolted. Okay, basically that's what happened. Okay. But things weren't that easy, because instead of dying all at once, it was progressively higher and higher levels. As they swelled, stars became bigger and more overpopulated. Ultimately, turn a bright shade of red and become massive, sucking in planets which rejuvenated themselves as they grew ever larger and their field more enormous. But this cycle cannot go on forever, of course. While stars that were truly big in the beginning can go past red to become blue stars by fusing that helium further into denser and denser elements and ultimately iron. Some stars have a shorter expiration date. When they do, the matter swells up to a threshold beyond which they can contained. They, in the greatest splendor since the very beginning, explode, releasing more light in these few seconds than they did in their lifetime. When our species witnessed one of these eponymous supernovas, it inspired many scientific and technological advancements. But everything we have is all thanks to one that happened long before that. For you see, when the explosion settled, oftentimes it formed black holes. Places where matter and mass is compressed into such a density that nothing can escape, not even light. But thankfully, that is not what happened to us. Instead, we formed a nebula, where the matter did not collapse, and therefore is free to create something new, and regrow, which it did. It so did. Matter that was left out after the cleanup was essentially transmuted into two regions. That which was small enough not quite to get absorbed into the dark, and that which was left behind. They became what we now know as the sun and planets. However, in the beginning, planets weren't quite the way you would expect them to be. For example, there were over 100 bouncing around the solar system, but were so tiny that they could be destroyed by by some weapons that we have today. But as they slowly collided and compacted and grew ever larger, 8 supreme powers seemed to emerge into the solar system, or rather, other than the sun, of course. The first empire was Mercury, which at that point had very little to its name, but in the future play a vital part in the life of another world. The next was Venus, which, like Mercury, shared Mercury's fate, but at the time also shared a glorious past, where life forms inhabited it under a steamy sky and jungles abundant, filled with, as strange as this may seem, seas of carbonated water. Third was our own world, Earth, which started out as a molten ball of molten rock, which was doomed to be quite like Mercury, but then something happened. New planet Theia slowly approached, and when it collided, matter from the Earth was blown off in chunks all around. Utterly destroying both planets. But from what was left, second Earth was born, the one we know and love. And from the ashes of the second chunk, we got the moon. This is what truly changed our story. There was also Mars, which, like Venus, was inhabited. Phaeton, which I draw in this color because we have really no idea, and this shape is really, we have no idea what it was like, because it soon would be wiped from history. And many more, most of which you have heard before, and unlike these, have remained unchanged for a long time. The same cannot be said for their moons, but that is not my story. So, we have these 5 great powers, but the next event is even stranger. As Mars and Phaeton gradually grew closer and closer and closer, the gravitational bond became too great for Phaeton as it approached its Roche limit and was torn to pieces. Some became the asteroid belt, the wall between the terrestrial planets and the gas giants, and the others became Mars's moons, Phobos and Deimos. But back to our planet. As you know, there was watery elements within the Earth long before true water began to emerge, but most of it came from comets which rained down upon our world in the Great Bombardment. The cause of this will be explained much, much, much later, as it was what your kind would call a spoiler. Yes, I know your scientists have a hypothesis for why this was, but frankly, theirs is wrong. So, what happened next was truly incredible. Somehow, some way, carbon and hydrogen and oxygen clumped together in the depths of the sea and became and became the first life. These cells. But once again, it is a misconception by your kind, as these things did not come here by mere chance or coincidence, but were brought by a greater power. This world was seeded. In any case, origins aside, what these life forms did next was, just as their creation, using that very useful word, amazing. The cells began to rapidly divide, creating copies of themselves. Which became better, and each replication brought increasing change from the force we call mutation. And the lesser adapted life forms were destroyed altogether. So, only better adapted forms survived, resulting increase in complexity and advancement. Till there was one form that tried something new entirely. But then again, that's another story. So this is the second installment of The First People. I hope you enjoyed it as much as you did the last. My name has been King Cadmos, and as you know, we are slowly getting closer, ever closer, to our own planet and our own life. As always, my name is King Cadmos, and thanks for all the fish. 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 Thanks for all the fish.